Peer-to-peer lending has made huge advances in recent years in terms of size, scope and maturity. We ask our industry experts what their predictions are for the future of peer-to-peer lending.
My predictions for the future of peer-to-peer lending is that we're already now no longer the new kid on the block. So even though, as we talked about before, there's still not a broad general awareness of peer-to-peer lending as an asset class, like we would see for savings or equity, and the innovative finance ISAs barely out there as a concept for the general public. In terms of where things are going next, we're becoming kind of the mainstream, and the newer investment opportunities that are hitting the UK now are cryptocurrencies and ICOs. So it's going to be interesting to see how fast P2P can stabilize itself as a mainstream financial product versus the competition, so to speak, for attention, press attention, regulatory attention that we're going to see from ICOs and cryptocurrencies.
I think we're really we've got quite an interesting year ahead. I think I probably say that every year when it comes to P2P lending. The market is just changing so quickly, and we've got through the large majority of the regulatory hurdles. Now that most of the firms out there have proven their business model to the FCA, they're live, they're running, they're able to really get that kind of real increase in scale. They're able to open up their innovative finance ISAs and really test out the market in the way that they intended to, probably a good few years ago now. So I think we've now reached a stage where business models will be looking to distinguish themselves from competitors, and I think that's going to be the interesting play this year. What are people going to bring to the fore that really distinguishes them from the other names that they might be competing with, whether that's in the property space? How is one platform going to distinguish itself from another, and equally in consumer and business finance as well?
I think there'll be some big ones that float, and some people who make a lot of money, some guys and girls who really cash in and get well rewarded. I think there'll be quite a lot that will, I think there'll be a number that will get in trouble in the sense that they will do something wrong or incur the wrath of the regulators. And then I think there's a lot of them that will just coast along earning a thin profit and struggle to keep getting investors and struggle to keep finding borrowers as it gets more and more competitive. I think that there are others that will find it hard to carry on or incur losses way beyond what they projected when credit quality starts to decline and they find they can't handle it, particularly in the SME sector, where you don't have individual borrowers and there's no fear of, personal bankruptcy or something like that, and just it's company, let it go, whatever. So it's kind of like a pyramid, there's some people at the top are going to make a lot of money, guys and girls are going to make a lot of money for some hard work, and some of those will probably be absorbed by large banking or financial services groups, and then at the bottom there are going to be a small number of people also who are going to have some horrible outcomes with regulators or legal or whatever. And then in the middle, there's just going to be a large mass of folks carrying on without big profits, and there is a risk there that as credit quality, as we go into a new credit cycle, as credit quality deteriorates, they're going to find it harder and harder. And I would say the bulk of them will probably just give up one day. They won't lose their homes or have dire circumstances, but even though it's all automated and digital and wonderful, the effort it takes to keep it going won't justify what they're making out of it. That's the thing. I don't see this as a space travel, Suzie. I just don't see P2P as taking off and replacing banks. The original idea was Airbnb, and the power of the people will replace these bankers who've caused the financial crisis and made us all so miserable, from which we're still suffering today. But the dynamics of the industry, such as it was when it was a pure play industry, have shown that's not really going to happen, I think.
So I hate the question about predicting the future. Thank you for that. Inevitably you get it wrong. What'll be really interesting, we'll see August 2018, we'll see the first set of the ISA statistics, and when the government did their calculations of the cost of the innovative finance ISA to the Exchequer. If you work back from the cost to the Exchequer, it suggests they think something like 800, 900 million a year. So nudging £1 billion a year would be invested into peer-to-peer and of course crowd bonds. So if you look at the stats even for 2016-2017, we're already doing 3 billion a year into lending to consumers, lending to businesses, lending to property. So if a third of the lending to consumers, businesses and properties was done through an FISA, we're already at £1 billion market. Now that becomes hard to ignore. And all the press questions this year have been, well, you know, damp squid hasn't quite got off the ground yet, because of course a lot of the platforms who were doing P2P, not bonds because they were already authorised, the guys doing P2P took longer to get through. Probably a good thing. Very, very painful for some of those platforms, but there's almost a badge of honour now if you've passed through that FCA process. It was non-trivial to get through. So it was slower last year because people weren't authorised. I think it will have jumped. I would imagine we're somewhere between, 250,000 and £1 billion already in the second year of FISAs, and we'll get to £1 billion the year after. And that makes it mainstream, plus the £20,000 a year limit now. We're seeing the more experienced investors hitting the wall on their pension. You know, those days when you could put 40,000 in every year are gone if you're over the £150,000 limit. You also have to declare when you're getting to £1 million. So we're seeing it downing a lot of SIP investors coming into the bonds, because it's much easier to do bonds than the P2P lending. There's no connected parties issue. And using their full FISA allowance because they've been doing 40 grand a year in SIPs for 3, 4, 5 years. And now they've got this 30,000 left and they don't know where to put it. And they might have done a buy-to-let, but the buy-to-let isn't attractive anymore. You know, tax is a very blunt tool, but it's very, very effective. And the drop in FISAs last year, right, that, what was it, 30% drop, absolutely massive. People choosing to put the money into personal savings allowances. Personal savings allowances work really well for that year. But if you're a P2P lender, at getting an average return of around 4 or 5%, you can only have £12,500 in peer-to-peer before you start paying tax. Personal savings allowance is good this year, but you will end up paying tax in following years for that as well. So I keep talking about the tax treatments, I guess, because Downing grew through EIS and VCT, so I'm very cognizant of that. But there's about 200 billion in SIPs, there's 568 billions in ISAs. That is a massive addressable market, that is mainstream. And it allows us to lend for longer term. And when it's longer term, our fees can go down just a little bit here and there to make us more competitive. We get to scale quicker, we get to break even quicker, and we make the returns just that little bit better for the lenders because they're tax-free, no more risk, better net return, and we're more competitive to the borrowers. And at that point, it's hard to see how the banks are going to start to recover the market share that they're already losing today.